Hello, everyone. Welcome to our workshop on energy movement. Today, I'm very happy to welcome Rich McDonald, who is the founder and CEO of ATEC. Rich is based in Chicago, and today we have a very interesting and exciting webinar, actually about the business development and how to bring new products on the market and how to develop the services in compressed air, in the pneumatics, and mostly in the automation industry. So I'm very happy to have Rich here. So Rich, the floor is yours. And
Thank
just
you.
go ahead, maybe with a short introduction, and we're
Sure,
really happy to have you here.
sure. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here and an honor to be here to address your audience and share with you what we're doing at ATEC. Basically, ATEC is a consultancy, and we're based out of Chicago and Grand Rapids, Michigan. And our focus is really when we started out in 2020, right at the height of COVID. In essence, it was really the focus on the traditional 4 P's of marketing and market research related to industrial tech companies. And then later in about 2022, we shifted to basically a consultancy focused on really what I'll refer to as is not competitive intelligence, but competitive insights. And the difference is this: the difference is that most often competitive intelligence, gives you lots of data, but it doesn't give you any type of per se recommendations or suggestions about improving your position in the market and being able to fend off any of the competitors that may be encroaching on your position in the marketplace or your target market, what have you. So our philosophy really is around, and our thesis is around, sharing with companies competitive insights related to manufacturers in what I refer to as the industrial tech space. And basically, that happens to be very much in the domain of fluid power, fluid control, and what we refer to as fluid management. And we'll get into more detail on that as we go along. So I'm happy to be here, and let me share my screen and pull up. How about now?
Perfect.
Okay. All right. So today, we're talking about competing for the future. And the reason that I framed it as competing for the future is that in some of the research that we've done within the space, what I've seen is a dramatic shift in some of the players within the traditional fluid power industry and some of the ways that they've, grew in the past. And it looks like they're trending towards to grow in the future. And so I identified 4 companies that, basically in our report that we're releasing, basically, focuses on these 4 companies, which are Camazi Automation, which is an Italian pneumatic and fluid power company, Emerson Electric, which in their fluid power arena, they own companies such as Aventix Pneumatics, Jucomatic, and ASCO. So some, pretty significant players within fluid power. And then the target company for this case study that we'll talk about today is a firm from the UK by the name of Helmel, and then IMI. And of course, IMI is another large player within the fluid power and the fluid control arena today. So in essence, looking at today's goals and objectives are basically to share with you some of the analysis that we've gone through, And that will be done through an overview of what we refer to as our dashboard, which is called guidance.2. And guidance.2 is a product that is in development right now. And we're basically, this is our competitive insights dashboard and database. Right now, we have more than 125 companies within the database. And these are just, 4 of the companies with a special focus on Hamel today as part of the competitive insights case study. And then, from we'll talk a little bit about the future state in 2030, what Hamel ultimately could do to better position themselves. And again, this is an opinion. This is not anything that they're doing, but just an opinion of, looking at their capabilities, looking at their portfolio, how could they best align that to compete for the future. And then we'll have some Q&A. Speaking of Q&A, feel free to, raise your hand, and we can certainly take some questions during the course of our discussion today. But also hopefully leave some time at the end for Q&A as well. So a little bit about basically my background, etc. I'm not going to read all this to you, but certainly it's in the deck, and you can certainly go over that. But I've had career positions, out of college, starting with Honeywell. I rose to the position of regional manager there, covering the West Coast, and then became marketing manager at Pneumatics Inc. before the sale of the company to Emerson Electric. Then worked for a smaller company by the name of Humphrey Products, and a startup in Connecticut by the name of Enfield Technologies. And then for finishing my career, bookending that with Parker Hannifin, a long stint with Parker as a product development manager, as well as a product manager and market development manager. So basically, I've sort of spanned the space of discrete, hybrid, and process manufacturing in my career. And so that's a pretty unique scenario. Most people are singularly focused, either in fluid power or fluid control, and sort of dabble in one or the other. But so I sort of have a little bit of a rarity as far as some background, and gives me a lot of vision, if you would, across the industrial space to be able to see what's happening, and which is truly beneficial for today. A little bit about, some of the typical consulting projects that we do at ATEC. But before I get into that, you'll notice 2 Parker Hannifin photos. These in the upper right-hand corner, that's the Indigo exoskeleton, where I was a principal, one of 3 participants in the market research team that led us to the ultimate acquisition of that IP, and in the funding of the division to start the human motion division of Parker. So that was really a great opportunity and a great project, because it ultimately ended up on the front cover of Parker's annual report. So I'm pretty proud of that. Down in the lower left-hand corner is another project that I was principally involved in what we call the PCH portal, which has just come out in about the last year, a little over a year now. And that's basically a communications block, and allows for connectivity for safety systems, as well as serial and bus networking for communications. So going back to ATEC now, some of the industries, you can see there ranges from fluid power to agricultural to industrial to human motion. to, such things as, espresso and coffee machines. So, it's, we've done work in all that. Some of the typical engagement questions that, come up from, our clients, basically, talk about markets, market trends, key players, products, technologies, distribution. Those seem to be, the more common buckets of questions that we get, at the consultancy for clients. And, then understanding that, sort of taking that down into, the more discrete things, such as, in market trends, looking at relevant technology and aftermarket, and looking at key buying criteria and unit volumes and pricing and so on and so forth. And, technology selection criteria from an end user perspective or from an OEM perspective. So that's a little bit of background about ATEC. This is a very busy page, and you'll see lots of other busy pages in this deck. So I apologize in advance for that, but a lot of information to share with you. So I hope that you can stay with us, looking at that. The guidance.2 is basically again a database, and we're turning that into a dashboard, which will be then utilized by clientele, if you would, and updated by us and maintained by us. And it really revolves around three key buckets. The firm data, and when I say firm data, I'm talking about the nth name company data that we collected. And keep in mind, in the fluid power industry, as well as across the fluid control and fluid management systems businesses, a lot of these companies are both public and private. There's actually more private companies than there are public companies for the ones that we focus on. And speaking of focus, the companies that we're focusing on are not the more common companies that you see in market research reports. If you've ever purchased a market research report on our industry or looked at one, you'll see that they focus on IMI and Parker and, maybe Kamazi's in there, and, several other names, right? And everybody covers those guys. But what's most important, basically, is the fact that, we look at it as, we're identifying companies that are in that small to medium-sized enterprise. And that small to medium-sized enterprise is really where the action is, because those companies are the ones that are getting acquired by these larger organizations. They're doing partnerships with, they're doing strategic joint ventures with, and so on and so forth. So we've taken the opposite approach, in building out our database. Not that we won't include the larger companies, because we will, but the value that we think that customers can get from this and clientele can get from this is being able to have insights into emerging companies, as well as the smaller companies that are in that small to medium-sized enterprise, the SMEs, if you would, that range in turnover, upwards of, at the high end of 300 to 400 million. Certainly, there's companies that exceed that in our database, into the billions, actually, such as Festo and SMC. But nevertheless, our focus is to bring some clarity and bring some research power to that lower tier, organization, and share that with industry stakeholders. The next, the fourth piece of the picture here is the innovation data, and that's basically talking about the IP of the companies that will be researching and providing insights around. And that includes their patent activity, includes some of the latest technologies that they've released and or solutions that they've released. Is there a question? Was there a question?
Sorry, Mateus, could you please mute your mic? Thank you so much.
Of course. Excuse me.
Thank you. Sorry, Rich, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So then, as well as, one of the other things that we'll be adding to this is distributors and systems integrators as part of the database as well, in that version 2.1, which is in Q3 of 2024. And really sort of looking at that, in a really holistic way across the entire, ecosystem of, fluid power and fluid control and fluid management systems. And we think that that's a very unique offering, and one that is, solely missed, within the industrial automation space. So this is an infographic of, just, more than 50 key players within the space today. And I'm sure you recognize a lot of these names, but the key point in this slide that I want to identify for you is that what we're seeing is some convergence here across pneumatic equipment, fluid control, and fluid management. And you'll see, similar logos. As an example, Parker is in all three, my former company. And there's other participants that are in either 2 or 3 of these sectors. And what we're seeing is that, there's, again, some convergence here of companies coming from that fluid management side, and I'll explain and define that for you in a moment, down into fluid control and into pneumatic equipment, or they're going from pneumatic equipment into fluid control and possibly into fluid management. The difference is, basically pneumatic equipment is for the control and actuation and the power, and either in force and in motion, right, of a product or a component. The fluid control arena is really defined by us as, in simple terms, is basically the control of a fluid or a gas, so fluidics in essence, throughout a piece of machinery or an instrument, what have you, right? And fluid management takes into account both pneumatic and fluid control, but also it incorporates the aspect that you'll see pumps involved. You'll see, some other types of sensors involved in that arena, et cetera, in completing that fluid management. So it incorporates all of the aspects of fluid power, right, and fluid control. And so you would see things, as an example, in metering applications and dispense applications and that type of thing in that fluid management. So it's really key to understand that, some of the companies in that fluid management bucket, are, again, very unique, from the standpoint that they're not in pneumatic equipment, they're not in fluid control, but they have their own presence in, fluid management. And some people, may call that fluid handling, and that's a very common term. But we've, put the moniker and the name of fluid management systems because we think that's the emerging field, and that's where the puck is going to go, if you're a hockey fan. And so we've recognized there's a significant amount of investment going into that arena, and that's what we're really really closely monitoring as we're going forward. our basic competitive insights model is built up on the multiple layers, as you saw before. But really, when you think about strategic intelligence, market intelligence, and gaining competitive insights, that we want to bring forward, to our clientele. The key thing here is looking at what a competitor is saying in the marketplace. What are their resources and their capabilities and their assets? And then understanding who within those organizations is really making the decision, right? And I put a thing in there, understanding the leaders' backgrounds, and Patton read Rommel's books, right, on tactics, and just to as a reference point, right? So it's understanding who the enemy is, so to speak, right, or frenemy, whichever you refer to it as. But our competitive insights is really to not attack the competitor per se, but it's to provide greater value to the ultimate customer, and helping our clients provide greater value, as opposed to just a defensive or an offensive playbook for our client. Really understanding that market and understanding how a customer is making a decision and what they're looking for when they are making a decision for selecting a component supplier, or looking for a subsystem solution to go in their instrument and or their device. So from a competitive environment standpoint, and I'm sure that all of you here recognize a lot of the common names here within this sheet, but if you take a look at the competitive structure in 2023 of industrial automation, and you look at it from a pneumatic standpoint, there's 300 to 400 companies of all different sizes across the globe participating in pneumatics in some way, shape, or form. Whether it's just a valve company, whether it's a fully integrated supplier like an SMC or Festo or an IMI or Parker or Emerson. And so when we take a look at the space, or the fluid management system space, we put together a competitive environment sheet. This happens to be just focused on the pneumatic players, but here are some of the notable M&A activities, mergers and acquisitions, and divestitures, right? And this can really tell you a lot about what's happening in an industry, right? So one of the couple of things I want to call out to you under the notable mergers and acquisitions category. Destaco, which some of you may know, was owned by Dover Corporation. They recently were sold to Distilbus SE in Europe for $680 million roughly, and just as an example. And Tudhill, which was a very famous pump brand here in the U.S., Tudhill exited the pump industry, sold all their assets in the pump industry, and basically purchased a company in the U.S. called Eagle Pisher Technologies for an undisclosed amount. However, Eagle Pisher is a company that's involved in battery technology. And so they made a quantum shift to exit the business, right? They got out of the pump business and they went into the battery business, huge shift. And then you have IMI that acquires, Bar for 98 million euros. And Parker acquires Meggitt, which is an aerospace firm in the UK. And Danfoss acquires Eaton, right? For 3.3.
Hey.
Omar, could you mute your mic, please? Thank you. And so why is it important to understand what the competitive arena is doing? Well, these are some of the reasons why it's important for you to understand what's going on in a more holistic view of your world, right? Because what's happening from these companies, either acquiring other companies or divesting of companies and exiting businesses and entering businesses, is dramatic, right? Because now you have new players, and you've got companies that are acquiring companies with very unique capabilities, or divesting of those companies with unique capabilities, and another player in the industry acquires those companies. So we think it's very important for any size manufacturer to understand the competitive environment and that competitive landscape, going forward. So part of our analysis is when we take a look across, the space. We use this from a perspective of looking at this from a electromechanical space, with XLR as an example, which is owned by Curtiss-Wright. In fluid control, we have a company by the name of Burkert Fluid Control, which many of you probably are aware of. And then there's Watson Marlow and fluid handling, and basically they're a leader in peristaltic pumps. And then you've got Rockwell Automation and HMS and Festo and Parker and Gamal and Fanuc and robots, and SICK and sensors. So, but what's important here is the buckets for these strategic groups, and how these companies not just participate in one sector, but cross-pollinate themselves across many sectors, right? And that's what's important. And understanding, where they play, and understanding their capabilities and their technologies and their path to market and their strength within each of those areas and each of those vertical markets that they attack and they service, and understanding where that can take them to in the future. So that's what's very critical, right? So now this is the beginning of our analyses of Hamel, and basically we'll talk about some of their organizational structure, their M&A history, which is significant, a strategy map, and their competitive advantage, and then a few more analyses that we've done, just as an example here of some of the work that we do, when we investigate a company and look at them for our database. And so I hope that this information will be interesting to you and informative, and give you a different perspective of what our industry is all about, and how the industry is shaping and continues to shape itself and grow in different ways, from just the old traditional pneumatic company is no more, right? The traditional pneumatic company is doing a lot more, or if they're not doing a lot more, they better start moving quickly, because they're not going to be around for lots of different reasons. Are there any questions, up to this point? Any comments? Okay.
I think maybe I have just one question, comment, but probably you will cover it in the next slides. I see that the company is now moving more into the area of service rather than the products. So basically, they don't sell any more, I don't know, efficient cylinders or applications. They rather sell, for example, audit service, and then through this, a monitoring system, then they put it their components. So just wanted to ask you about this directions, maybe in the next slides, or.
Yeah, so we'll touch a little bit on that, but that's a very astute observation, and basically that is happening across the board, right?
Mm-hmm.
The manufacturers are picking up, what I refer to as the digital mantle, right? And they're saying, for us to grow, we need to have a service aspect, a machine as a service, or robots as a service, or software as a service. And that SaaS model is becoming very, very strategic for a lot of these companies. And that's part of the analysis that we have done. I didn't include that particular sheet in here, but we have a sheet on some of the players already that basically describes the amount of revenue that they're generating from their SaaS activities.
Okay, great.
Yeah, which is very informative, because you can see where that SaaS and IoT piece is really contributing to their overall value, right? And customers are seizing that. So it's very much an important aspect. Going back,
thank you.
Sure. Going back to the Hamel, basically case study here. Hamel's built up of three sectors. They focus on safety, environmental analysis, and healthcare. And the technologies that they have within each of those domains, you see, highlighted here. And then I didn't include the companies that are a part of that at this particular juncture, but you'll see that in a moment, how that aligns. And what we've identified as important to us as being, a critical piece, for this analysis. And you'll see how all that aligns. So when you take a look at their technologies and the operating companies that are in what we call in our scope, what we've said is what's of interest to us is where are they placing bets, right? And where are all these companies placing bets, either through acquisitions, through joint ventures, through licensing, through some type of inorganic growth opportunity for those companies. Besides, their own R&D, where are they making bets? And where some of these companies are making bets, basically, fall into, in the particular, with Hummel, you have the industrial access control. They just recently acquired an Australian firm by the name of LaserSafe. They've owned Fortress Interlocks for couple decades now, and Centric Safety Group are all part of that industrial access control piece. And then looking at their environmental and analysis sector, they have a particular company by the name of ATEC. And ATEC is a mass flow control company, is their core technology and core offering. And then over in the healthcare space, under life science, they have a group of companies called ArcMed, and that includes a valve company, which is a fluidic valve company called Biochem Valve, and OmniFit Fittings and Diba Industries. And they've aggregated those three companies in under one brand name called ArcMed. And then they have a Chinese company, which is a company by the name of Longer Pump, which is, basically building application-specific pumps for the medical arena, specifically, from dialysis machines to a variety of others. And, on those types of pieces of instrumentation, you're looking at, peristaltic pumps, to be specific, is what they're offering. So this slide, sort of details, those particular companies within the arena. And what we're trying to make clear here is basically, they're portfolio companies that are of interest to us in this analysis that we're doing. And this analysis really sort of lined up with not only automation, but ended up looking at life science and medical. And so that when we're looking at the Halmo company, we're looking at it through that lens of, where are they participating in factory automation or industrial automation in life science and medical device markets. And these are the companies that are related to those specifics, right? And ATEC is a little bit of an outlier because, their mass flow controller does have applications, for not mass flow, but for pressure and flow control opportunities within life science across liquid handling and sample handling and air gas handling. So we have a slide coming up that you'll see that, where we think that, those companies could leverage the ATEC technology and build out their business even stronger by doing that. The industrial access control side of the equation here is just a reference to some of the things they're doing in factory automation. Some of you may know Fortress Interlocks, but they are, a leader in the safety arena and industrial access control for, everything from, robotic cells. And of course, employee safety is critical today, and corporate, America and European companies are really investing heavily in industrial access control. And of course, companies such as Fortress and Uchtner out of Germany and several other companies, those companies are all benefiting from, that safety trend and being able to ensure that, the worker is protected in a robotic cell or, some other type of, application for stamping presses or forging presses or whatever the case may be. So, looking at some of the, acquisition history of Hamel, and we believe that this is a very, core way to look at a public, any competitor, but certainly a public competitor, right? We think that this is, very, very interesting to understand where they making their bets, where are they placing their dollars, right? And you see, they have 4 bolt-on acquisitions. They've got 6 in safety, 6 in healthcare, and 5 in environmental. So it's well balanced, right? Is one of the trends that you see here. But more importantly, from this slide, what I want you to take away is that, Hamel is basically very much a programmatic acquisition company. Not only are they a holding company, but they're very programmatic when it comes down to their acquisition and strategy and execution, right? And that's good to know as far as, looking for competitive insights and understanding the types of companies that they're investing in, and not only from an investment standpoint, but more importantly from a capabilities and a asset standpoint. What's the IP assets that come along with these acquisitions, and what are those aligning technologies that can, basically be applied across, multiple sectors or even just in one sector? How can that particular company that they just acquired, add on to, add value to the overall scope of a corporate offering, if you would, to a marketplace. Oh, a little too far. So, looking at, a strategy map of them, basically helps us understand, not only where these bets are, but also understanding the linkages of basically these companies and understanding that, how these companies are playing together in this particular case, and or how they could be playing together in the future, and aligning to offer again a more powerful product offering. Again, as I said earlier before we got into the deck, it's all really about offering more value to clients and offering more value to the marketplace, as opposed to just going in and looking at competition, and that's my competition, and I need to try to disrupt them in a way to gain the advantage. You gain the advantage not by focusing on the competition, but by focusing on the customer and bringing the customer value. That's how you win, right? So another analyses that we've done with respect to Hamel is basically the VRIO analysis, VIRO, and that basically looks at what's valuable is the V, R is what's rare within that company, and is it hard to imitate is the I, and the O is the firm organized to capture value. And when you take a look at those attributes, and of course these are all subjective, right? This is our view of Hamel based on the interviews that we've done, based on the research that we've done with on our own, and looking at company data and looking at other sources. We feel that, as an example, Hamel has a labware products, right? Which doesn't sound like it should be rare, but it is rare in this particular case because they are one of the singular companies that offers labware at scale that will allow a user, an end user in a lab, be able to purchase componentry for the lab bench, right? Along with the fluidic management manifold system and miniature fluidic valves and fittings, right, from their portfolio. So we think that having that labware products is another strategic lever that they can pull within their marketing mix to be able to penetrate a client, and maybe offer that as a strategic lever to get into and penetrate a client, and then backtrack into the fluidic systems, and by having an established relationship with labware. Or they can use it just directly in the opposite. They start with a fluidic relationship, and then bring that down into growing labware sales within that same client. So that relationship piece is critical. And then just for clarification, I thought that it was important for us to throw in. I've mentioned a couple times the fluid power, the pneumatic equipment, the fluid control and fluid management. But now I'm sort of adding in this participation across discrete automation, what we call process automation, and hybrid automation. And if you take a look at the descriptions and the typical applications and some of the offerings within those categories, you start to see some alignment across those. But more importantly, where the real opportunity is in the future is in this hybrid and discrete piece, right? In the process arena, it's really dominated by the Emersons of the world. It's dominated by Siemens. It's dominated by lots of other major companies, and across the process arena. Where can a pneumatic company go? It's basically discrete and hybrid automation. This is where the opportunity lies. But again, as I said earlier, we saw this cross-pollination of fluid management companies, as we've identified them. A lot of those, do have aspects to them that are process automation in scope and scale, such as Emerson. They're coming from the process arena down into hybrid automation and then down into discrete automation. Whereas, the fluid power companies are going from discrete to hybrid up to process. But again, that process is a very, very different type of environment to compete in. This slide is sort of an interesting slide because what we did here was we took a look at the sales concentration by industries. And if you take a look at, again, our case study here today, this is on Hamel, but I added in the other companies just so that you could see the difference. Hamel and their Fortress Interlocks and Laser Safe, they participate in discrete industries. Their business for COTS or commercially off-the-shelf componentry is more than 25% of the products that they sell are just basically commodity within that that sphere, if you would. And then basically in the hybrid industries, you now start to see some modified products by them, and that generates about 50% their sales concentration within that space. And of course in process automation, they're just not there. That's not an area that they participate in. So looking at the comparing some products and market strategies quickly, we think that Hamel, they're really focused on seeking to increase their market share, increase their product range, and find new applications at current customers. That's where they're at today, very much so. And based on all the research that we've done, they have not really taken advantage of their position, and at least in the last few years, they have not taken advantage of their position in this microfluidic market to be able to add on companies and or expertise in that area, to build that out at more. Versus IMI, which is taking the exact opposite approach, where IMI has been aggressively purchasing companies within this range and area. And a company like Hamel, if they do not start to grow their portfolio of product, either organically through R&D or through acquisition, they're going to be in a losing position in a very near term, in our opinion, versus an IMI and versus an Emerson to a certain extent. Kamazi, we labeled them, just so that you're clear on the reason that their logo is in the middle. We labeled them as stuck in the middle. Kamazi has basically sort of taken the approach of we'll bring out a product or two within a new area, like an electronic gripper or a microfluidic valve, and then they stop. They don't bring out a complete overall product range within that particular arena. And customers, within the medical and industrial automation space, they want a broad portfolio of product, from the same vendor. They don't want to, pick and choose and basically, what we call in the U.S., cherry pick their portfolio. They want to be able to, basically say, we have one or two vendors and we can buy everything from those one or two vendors. That's the trend, unless you've got a very, very unique technology. So again, this is a simple view of how we see Hamel. some relatively, relative areas of strength by each player. You'll see here, from the legend, the yellow is a product gap all the way through to competitive and, full range, capability. And you'll see, where some of the strengths are within each of these companies, in our opinion. From a Hamel standpoint, they have a nice presence in that factory automation, space for safety. And that's a very unique, very high margin space, and one that's growing very, very nicely. And, then, of course, we've just talked about the fluidic piece of that. And then, they have some gaps, from a connectivity standpoint, networking, connectivity, so on and so forth. So today, this is how we look at, Hamel. We look at their channel strength, we look at their business strength by market penetration and product portfolio. And then we label that from the standpoint of, how these divisions line up in our estimation based on our market research that we've done. And, we think that, this is where they are today. And, basically where could they be in 2030? We see, Alleycat, leveraging some of their technology and putting that into the same bucket as, the ArcMet and longer. We see that as a direct tie-in, for them. And, Fortress and LaserSafe, we think that LaserSafe acquisition that they made is going to be very meaningful and very accretive to their financial portfolio, their financial results, going forward. That's the conclusion of the slide deck. And I'll take any questions, and we can go from there.
Thank you so much, Rich. So let's see if anyone has some questions or comments. And if not, I'll ask you a couple of them.
Yeah, sure.
I know if David, Mateus, or Mar, if you would like to pose any questions. I found very interesting. Oh, yes, David, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to ask, what drove you to selecting to focus on Halma with this analysis? Was there something integral about them? Did you see them as, an up and coming player, or just a big shift in their focus?
Excellent question, David. I like that question a lot. The reason for selecting them for today's discussion is this. I see Hamel as a company that, as I just proved to you in some of their acquisition history, right? They have the financial resources, they have the operating integration capability of bringing in other companies. But within this space of this slice of life sciences and within the fluidic space, they haven't made any strategic investments from an M&A standpoint. And I found it interesting because, some of the other companies that we're looking at and tracking, which are not only plentiful, but specifically, around this life science space, we just feel that, Hamel's in a very vulnerable position. And I thought it would be interesting to sort of focus this presentation on them for those reasons, as well as they're a company that we think that we could bring a lot of value to, specifically as a result of some of the work that we're doing. And so those were the three core reasons.
Oh, thank you. That makes sense.
Sure.
Well, I wanted to ask you more, maybe like on the strategic side for the companies that don't have so much investors, let's say, but there are companies, for example, in Italy that produce just few components. For example, they produce only cylinders. And then they develop some efficient solution also on top of this. But I see that there is a struggle usually for them to sell it somehow, because when you see the machine where pneumatics is used, you have the couplings, you have tubes, you have all the components, but they sell only the cylinder part. So only one actuator. Or there are companies that focus only on valves. What do you think? In which direction they could possibly go? Is it service? Do they need to be part of a bigger company, or what do you think is the possibility for them?
Well, there's a couple strategic choices that they can make, right? One choice would be to, look at the business from the standpoint that, they are going to go through some work and focus on some strategic alliances. A strategic alliance may be a private labeling agreement, white label agreement with a better known, larger company to basically populate their technology, throughout the market, and they could look at that on a regional basis, meaning, the Americas, Europe, as well as, Asia Pacific. A lot of larger companies want an exclusive when it comes to that. So there's going to be that dynamic that they're going to have to try to balance between, is our technology unique enough that we can, basically carve out, three partners if they wanted to do that. Other companies just want one partner, right, for a particular reason. But depending on, how, again, unique that is, that would be one consideration. Another consideration would be to take, basically look for a strategic alliance from an investment standpoint, right? That investment standpoint would be, a small equity position, within the company at 15-20%, from one of the major companies, and with the understanding that they're going to commercialize and leverage their technology across, their channel on a global basis, right? So those would be the two paths that I would initially look at. The third alternative is to go it alone, and as they're doing now, right? However, you need to be very, very strategic in that, and you need to identify, emerging spaces that are, basically where you can go in and dominate very quickly with your component and technology, and win the business, and be able to then build that out over a period of time across other application areas that you can dominate. And that's a difficult challenge, and it's a long way to go, right? Some companies, depending on, the age of the company, depending on their resources, they just don't have the emotional desire to do that, right? They want something quicker, right? So those would be three paths potentially.
Great. Thank you so much, Rich. Thank you.
Sure.
It was very insightful webinar, so I would like also to rewatch it. We will have the recording available, and I just want to remind everyone that you can contact Rich on our energy movement site in the expert area. So you'll find the contact details and also all the information that is needed. Thank you, everyone, and I hope you enjoyed it. Now, Rich, would you like to add something else?
Yeah, just some closing comments, and feel free to reach out to me and either by email or as you see on the screen. Our website is still under construction. Hopefully it will be done soon. But nevertheless, by email, if you'd like a copy of the slide deck, just email me and put in a subject line presentation, and I'll be happy to send you a copy of the slides. Again, we're open for consultation and open for consulting. And if there's anything that you'd like to talk about, I'd welcome the opportunity to chat and explore that with you, and go from there. And I appreciate you spending time with me today to learn about what we're doing, and hope it was valuable.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. And I'll see you in the next workshop. Thank you. Enjoy your day.
Bye-bye.